It's been a gift to know Ed Thomas, both personally and professionally. But for those of you who don't know him, I'd like to relay to you a very brief bio. Edward K. Thomas is President Emeritus of Central Council Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. His contributions to Indigenous leadership are important to the culture and history of Native people in Alaska and across the United States. This book depicts important events in Ed Thomas's life and shares how his life experiences influenced his tribal leadership values and the many activities and accomplishments Central Council achieved over the years. Ed served as the president of Central Council for a quarter of a century, and it was at the urging of the council's current president, Peterson, and many others, that Ed wrote about his history and the history of Central Council during his tenure, not to promote himself, but as an act of service to the tribal history. When you read this book, and I'm going to go ahead and hold it up so you can see it's more than just a cover, it's a real book. As you read this book, you will learn about how his upbringing in Craig, the lessons he learned from his grandparents who raised him, his time as a fisherman, his cultural education, as well as his academic education, his early life work, his marriage and his family relationships, and the challenges he had to overcome all contributed to what formed his values and motivated his approach to tribal leadership. During Ed's tenure at Central Council, he met regularly with senators, members of the House of Representatives from Alaska and the nation, worked across party lines, met with President George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr., President Clinton, and President Obama. Sorry, got a couple more people to admit here. Want to make sure that they can get in. He also served on numerous boards and commissions, both Native organizations and political organizations throughout Alaska and the lower 48. Again, not to promote himself, but to better serve the interests of the people and tribes he represented. I hope you will read this book and recommend it to others and take to heart the lessons that Ed so generously shares. In the book, Ed outlines many of Alaska Native historical achievements from the mid 1800s onward, and he puts into historical context the myriad of issues and challenges Central Council faced, issues also faced by Native leaders throughout Alaska and the lower 48. Before I turn this meeting over to Ed, I'd like to read to you three quotes from people who have worked with Ed and also looked at early copies of this book. The first is from Rosita Worrell, PhD and president of Sealaska Heritage Institute. And I quote, I was deeply privileged and honored to serve with President Emeritus Ed Thomas of the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes on the boards and directors of the Sealaska Corporation and Alaska Federation of Natives. I first met Ed Thomas when he was a young fisherman in his hometown of Craig and watched his educational and professional development throughout the years. His determination to improve the general welfare of Alaska Natives was apparent to all. He was relentless in pursuing business profitability in Sealaska and at the same time a strong advocate for shareholder employment in management positions and fair elections. His propositions to hold Alaska tribal meetings a day before the annual AFN convention helped bridge the gap between corporate and tribal issues addressed at the convention. I was proud to see the respect he garnered from other Alaskan Native American and Native American leaders at the national level. Perhaps most significantly, he reinvigorated our traditional Tlingit culture in his hometown by commissioning the carving and raising of his clan's Shukanadi pole, which was followed by a ceremony in which ancient clan names were given to scores of tribal members. He has earned his place in our history as a An Yadi, a noble person indeed. Next, I'd like to read to you the words of author Peter Metcalf from Metcalf Communications. He wrote, "Learning about Ed's early days helped me understand his strong commitment to improving the lives of Alaska Natives. He is part of a generation of leaders who emerged during the self-determination era." I want to read this quote from Joseph Coughlin, the former Gold Belt chairman of the board. He wrote, "Possessing strong leadership and management skills were important for Ed Thomas to retain leadership of Tlingit Haida Central Council for 27 years. He led the tribes through some very challenging times to where our tribe took the lead in areas of self-government, strengthening relations with the federal and state governments, and increasing tribal unity among Southeast Alaska tribes." At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Ed, and then we'll open the floor for sharing and responses and comments, and for you to ask Ed questions. Thank you so much.
Very much for your kind introduction, Susan. And I want to thank all of you online for being here for this particular Zoom meeting. I'm going to start off by saying that I have done a lot of writing in my time, but writing about myself is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in the world of writing. Anyway, I had some thoughts, as a writing. Those people who didn't like what I wrote would be upset. And then when I left something out, other people would be upset. And all those things kind of drag on you when you're writing. You want to be inclusive, but yet you don't want to drag it out so much. And so I had a very difficult time with that. I retired from Tlingit Haida 2014 and have been encouraged to write about my activities there, my successes and failures. And so there have been other people that, Kathy interrupted me, by the way. There have been other people that encouraged me. For example, Karen Elliott, she was doing her graduate thesis and called me up one day and said, "I'm writing about your life." And I was kind of caught off guard. And so I called her back and she said she's doing a thesis and was covering my life as she knew it as a delegate, not as a person that was a historian. But she did a lot of research on not only myself, but on Tlingit Haida, the Alaska Native Brotherhood, Ketchikan Indian community. And so it made for a good start. She laid the groundwork for thinking about writing about myself through an autobiography. Another thing that happened is a couple of years ago, President Richard Peterson called me up and said, "Have you seen the book about that David Boxley wrote?" And I said, "I hadn't." And so I went and bought it, and it really was inspiring. Of course, David, besides being a carver and an artist, was very much involved in the revitalization of the Tsimshian culture and practices. And so his book was filled with a lot of that. Of course, my life was a lot different, being more involved in fisheries and politics. So while I appreciated the things that he had done, I knew that I had to try harder to diversify my book from what his was. I have been blessed with a relatively long life, and the unfortunate thing with all of us, we are here only for a moment when we look at history. And I was inspired to have the title of this book, My Moment in Time, by a song sung by Whitney Houston, One Moment in Time. In that song, she encourages to be all you can be in your moment in time. And that while you're by yourself, there are others with you. And so to do your best in your moment in time. It was fun for me to think back about my early life, my educational experiences, my family life, and my life's work as an administrator. In my early life, I know that all those experiences growing up in my early family made me who I am today. There's so much that happens during those formative years that you have to recognize that it did a lot to forming who you are. You have to learn from the hard work and do all the things necessary to survive in a small community when resources are limited, and to rely on other family members to help make it through the day and to create a better life for the family. My grandmother, who mainly raised me, felt very strongly that a good education was necessary in order to have a better life and go into the future with this degree of success. Didn't take me, I didn't catch on to that theme right away. I took some time off after I had my associate's degree and didn't go back to get my degree, my bachelor's degree in University of Alaska until I was into my 30s. But going on to Penn State and getting my master's degree was probably the best decision I ever made. It helped me understand what I didn't know. And what I mean by that is when you go on and you get involved in education and been exposed to so many other forms of education, you come back and you try to go to work. And I found out that I had to take other classes, particularly in the area of finance, uh, when I went into the office and began working there. Getting back a little bit, when I became a successful purse-seine salmon fisherman, I knew then that I wanted to do more. And even though that life was mostly all I knew, I decided I was going to step aside from it after 25 years of being a commercial seiner and 12 of those years as a skipper on a seine boat. My first years as an administrator began with the Ketchikan Indian Education Program as its director. That was really an eye-opening experience for me, not only because of the administrative needs, but also because the culture that we were providing, or the cultural training and opportunities, it was very well embraced by the citizens in the community, not just the Native community, but also into the schools and in after-school activities for Natives and non-Native youngsters. Then I became the president of the Ketchikan Indian community. That was a very challenging ordeal, but very rewarding. The Ketchikan Indian community has now become a self-sustaining tribe that is well known for expanding not only into human services, but into healthcare and into the culture, and are very self-sufficient in taking care of their own. Finally, as president of Clinton Haida Central Council, as pointed out in the introduction, not only did we have a lot of new things happen within the tribe while I was there. But I had many opportunities to travel wide to other parts of this nation, into other Indian countries' domain, and to work with people who not only uh, participated in the very similar things that I did in the federal government, but also did things differently. They I mean, they welcomed sharing their ideas with you, with me, and other people. And it really helped me in the long term to strengthen the way uh, we dealt with things within the tribe. One thing that is very important when I talked about my early life, when you don't have a lot of resources, uh, you develop an understanding as what's needed. And taking that understanding on to becoming president of Clinton Haida, I was able to always look back, and when trying to get services out to our people, we needed to do it in a way, in efficient ways that made sure the services got to the people in a timely manner, which I felt that was not happening in not only my tribe, but in other tribes. We had to deal with the bureaucracy of the federal government, and it almost became a way to have an excuse not to be more efficient. And that always irritated me, even when I was in Ketchikan. We needed to get past the blame game and get on to creating policies that were uh, there to service the people and the distribution of the products you were responsible for. And so that was part of my challenge and upbringing. In in the chapters of this book, I followed the chapters with lessons learned, very simple statements about the lessons that I learned uh, in that part of my life. And I chose to put them at the end of the book instead of after each chapter, so that as people go through, they can look at other things that or other lessons learned that I had written down about other things, and it made more sense to have a central place for looking at lessons learned. I hope you're going to find it interesting to read about uh, my traditional life in the village and then moving to modern times, and how important it was to learn from life's challenges and opportunities. With that, I'm going to close, and I want to thank you all again for being here and see if anybody has any comments or questions. Feel free to chime in. Thanks again. Gulachij Howell election.
Thank you, Ed. I know that people are going to have questions, and I want to just take a moment to introduce Annie Kinchlow, who did the graphic design for the book. And Annie is one of the people who has had an opportunity to read this. And so I asked Annie to come prepared to get us started with maybe some comments that you'd like to make of what you learned, Annie, from reading this book. So you want to take yourself off mute and share with us?
Yes. Hello, everyone. When Susan asked me to do the design work of Ed's book, I was actually kind of excited because it gave me the opportunity to get to know who Ed Thomas was. And when I started, I had to read through all the chapters, all the words to make sure that pictures were going with the words. And so when I started these, and those first couple chapters were just, I was amazed at how he, it just being his grandmother and what she had to go through, me being a mother, I just can't believe what they go through. You know, those years of trying to just keep food on the table and keep the heat in the house and all that. But when I would tell some of my friends I was putting this book together, I I would say I can't believe how much Ed has done in his life. I mean, I just kept reading more and more and more and stuff, and I am so amazed at what you have given to this life and to what you have given to the Native communities. And also, it helped me understand a little bit more about the Native community since I am not Native. It just gives me another perspective of the land that I live on, and I thank you for that, Ed. So,
Thank you, Annie. Well, I know many of you have questions or things that you'd like to ask Ed, so please feel free to take yourself off mute and just chime in and ask your questions.
How long did it take you to write this book, Ed? We know how long it took you to live it, but how long did it take to write it?
It took me approximately 2 years. I had a lot of the writing done by the time I started working with Susan. As I mentioned, Karen Elliott had put a lot of thought and a lot of writing, and I just picked up on a lot of what she wrote, and that helped me a lot. And so that was all done last year, and then this year, with Susan working with me, we got most of that done in was about 8 months. So that's about all of them.
Thank you.
Ed, I was wondering if you could talk for a minute about the challenges that you think leaders today have to face that maybe you didn't have to face as a leader, and what's the most important thing that you want to pass on?
I think that the challenges that I had in my years, I think many of the young people will face the same thing. You know, divisiveness in your uh, organization, divisiveness in the community, Native community, some of the challenges between the races. I made the point once that racism was there when I was young. Racism was there before I was young. Racism is here after, and it's always going to be here. It's just how you deal with it. And so working with others is going to be a challenge. And I think it's very important to learn that you have to have good policies when you're in administration. Not policies to make you feel good, but policies that will help you do the job so that the clientele you have will benefit from your efforts. One other thing that the younger group has benefit of is the revitalization of the culture and languages. I think there's been a lot of growth where people understand, you know, the clan system, their heritage, and not only the songs, but also the origin of those songs and who owns the songs in the Tlingit community or Haida community or Tsimshian community.
Claudia, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you, Edward. My question is, as a leader, and it's funny because my question was forming just before you mentioned the word policies. Um, so my question is, as a leader, how do you hold people accountable if they don't follow, say, the guidelines, policies, or protocols?
That's an excellent question. And unfortunately, it takes communication. You can't just in an open meeting say, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. You have to call them in and have a meeting and see what gives, what's the problem, why does that seem to be a failure, or why does it seem to be a point of contention or objection, and that just goes on and on. It's really important to address what you're talking about because not only do times change, people change. New people come in. You can't just say, "Well, I covered that 10 years ago. Don't need to talk about it." You got to talk about it all the time and write it down, One thing that helped me in my administration was PowerPoint. I was able to learn things and put them into PowerPoint, have a staff meeting with one group and then refine it for the next group, and cover policies every time you have a full staff meeting. Very important to do that. Thanks for the question.
Go ahead, you have a question? Can you unmute?
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's so interesting. Ed, you mentioned having traveled to Native tribes all over the United States and different places. What did you find most, I don't know, it's like, what was that like, really? What was it like? And were the sharings that you did also things were recognized in other tribes, or was there some new things? And were there things that you took back home with you? I just appreciate your talking about that a little more.
Here I go talking to myself again. No, I think it's important to start with what was our common basis for talking. And it's dealing with federal policy, not just money. Native Americans have been legislated more than any other group in the United States. Some of those policies and some of the laws are okay and good, but so many of them are confusing and create conflict. One example, I really was pleased with the passage of the Indian Child Welfare Act, but when the implementation came, there was no money. You had all those rules and stuff to follow. You had to hire people to carry out the responsibilities of having a Welfare Act, and you didn't have the resources. That's just one example. Another example is we had a common point of indirect costs. When you manage a contract with the federal government, they allocate an indirect cost to help you manage that. When a corporation or a company gets a contract with the federal government, they call that part profit. They get their profit, but we never got full indirect cost. We got 80% for years, and we were expected to use resources we didn't have in order to manage those programs. So that created a common argument with so many tribes in the nation that brought us much closer together. One thing that I always remember, there are a lot of differences. For example, the Navajo, the largest tribe in the nation, they did things much different and avoided going into cahoots with other tribes because they felt that whatever they got would be watered down by working with other tribes and having their funds thrown into a melting pot. And I think they were right in so many ways because the vastness of their reservation and the underfunding of the infrastructure was really something they had to contend with, where some other tribes did not. But yet all the funds were put in one pot and divided up on some sort of formula put together by the government. The other is like in the Oklahomas, they were so much more established and grounded in procedures and laws and training. Their education system seemed to be much further ahead than many of us. And I always appreciated that because they were willing to share. They invited us to their country a number of times. And so that was something that I really admired, is how well they were ahead of us in so many ways. But of course, they had some good legislators that helped them also, Native American legislators that, what's his name, Tom, I can't remember his last name. But anyway, they have some guys that really helped them out. and work with them because they were Native American.
And I'd like to ask a serious question. First of all, we've known each other for a long time. You were the one who hired me when I first moved to Alaska and worked with the Ketchikan Indian Corporation. Some of the happiest years I've spent in my professional life were there and later in Sitka. Now that I'm back to my urban roots, I would like your thoughts on the recent distribution of delegates, reduction of delegates, and what you see going forward for this, for the urban natives out of Alaska and the Alaska people living there. What do you see for the future of the tribe in this regard? Thank you.
Not directly involved, so don't blame me. Now, on the serious note, I did meet with President Peterson prior to that vote and prior to the meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there directly before to attend the executive council meeting. And so I don't know what happened in some of the caucuses. And then I ended up getting, I nearly got pneumonia the first 2 days of that tribal assembly. But the point I was trying to make is that the original law that formulated Tlingit Haida Central Council had one man, one vote policy, that you had to have an equitable distribution of delegates representing an equitable number of tribal citizens. And when you start deviating from that, you need to be clear what you're going to do in the future and what the intent of the change would be. We went through some of that, and I think one of the things that might have helped avoid this would be to have had the adoption of a policy whereby delegates would be based only on those we had contact with way back when. That way, it would not have grown so lopsided so quickly, because you may be aware that when Corinne Leach was our chairman of our enrollment committee, she was the one that suggested that we change that policy because while we were registering people and we were proud of it, we had so many people we couldn't contact. And all of a sudden, some of those people even showed up on other people's rolls in a different community. I'm not sure what the future holds on that. I hope that there can be some grounds for trying to mend wounds, but boy, it sounds to me like some of them are pretty deep. I promised that I would not kibitz on President Peterson and the Executive Council, but that's about the best I can do on articulating a little bit about what I went through when I was president and some of the hopes that I hope would happen when working through the problem now. Another thought I had was to have what I call the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate would be comprised of the highest vote getter in each community, and only that group would meet on the non-election years. And then everybody would meet on the election years. Of course, that wasn't very attractive to some folks that had the political clout to get there, no matter what anybody said. So I brushed that aside also. I just think that probably would be a better system than the current one, because I think that there's so much politics in the way you deal with it now. I hope that helps a little bit, or not doesn't make it any worse anyway.
Ed, I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I would be remiss as a facilitator of this meeting not to just take a moment right now to point out that you can purchase this book on Amazon, Amazon.com, and put in the title, or you can put in Edward K. Thomas and the title, and you'll find it in Amazon, and it'll be shipped out to you. And I also would be remiss in not asking you and one other question that I think people will find really interesting in the book, because I know I did. You share a lot about your early life, and I'd be interested in you talking a little bit more about how you talk in the book about culture, your culture, and how it impacted you as a leader. And I wonder if you could just take a minute to talk about how some of the elders from your youth faced adversity and what you think is important from their experience that you'd like to share with people today.
I even unmuted. Yeah, well, growing up, we had the elders who gathered and they spoke Tlingit to each other, and they kept in communication and shared subsistence resources. They did a lot of that. The unfortunate part about the cultural part is Craig was what you would call a 50-50 community, half native, half non-native. And not only that, many of the natives that ended up settling in Craig felt that it was important to put aside the culture to be competitive in the arena in which they were, which was with the non-native community, within the non-native people in the community. And not only that, there was a lot more emphasis on non-native education. So when I grew up, even though we knew some of the basic Tlingit words and could sing some church songs in Tlingit, we were not taught Tlingit at home, and it was not spoken readily. Where I got reintroduced with my culture is as the director of the Ketchikan Indian Education Program. Well, I should back up a little bit. I picked up some when I was the counselor in Sitka prior to that job. I watched what that program did and took some of those to Ketchikan with me. And so when I saw how much our culture was slipping away, I was really encouraged to try to learn more about it, and myself and my clan, as well as my family and friends. So that cultural part was really hit or miss depending on where you were in the Craig community. But on the other side of that is the subsistence lifestyle we took for granted. We thought that that's just the way life is. And we kind of went into each season knowing that we had things to do and we better prepare for them. I hope that hit part of your question.
It did, and I want to make sure that we open it up. And if anyone else has any questions, or Kathy, you have anything you'd like to share, now's the time. Mr. Demmer, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the only suggestion I have is involvement. One of the things that I think where we fail a little bit on our culture and perpetuating it forward is people will attend something like this and really get inspired or attend another conference. I think people need to go to cultural memorial services. They need to go to pole raising and follow the practice and find out where you fit into it. Those ceremonies was the way we validated our culture. And so you need to not worry about learning every word, every Tlingit word and all that stuff, or every Haida word, but participate in terms of being there and maybe ask a question of somebody you know. What is this all about? I attend a lot of them, and I still don't know that there's any correct way to do this or that, depending on what clan you're in. But it's all passing on the culture in a traditional way, verbally and association. And I think there's a lot of curriculum coming about where people can buy a program on Tlingit culture, Tlingit phrases. I got both. Haida dictionary, and like Haida terms. I'm not sure about Tsimshian. I think they have some. They were working on phrases at last I heard. But those kinds of things are really helpful. And we do have a lot of young people that are becoming expert apprentices, either in carving or in the workshops and languages and the dance groups. Dance groups are very important to our people because they do have the social part of it that will uh, allow people to build their interests around. First, what you're talking about is a thing that is challenging all of our people in many different arenas. And far be it from me that I don't have all the answers, I just have suggestions.
Hello. Hi, this is Nancy Barnes, and I just wanted to thank you, Ed, for being a mentor and a leader, and you've paved the way for a lot of us. And, I always hear the term, what would Ed Thomas say? And I just want to, I can't wait to buy the book. I'm going to buy it for Christmas presents, and thank you for everything that you've done. You've made an impact in my life, and I've followed you for many decades. So thank you, Ed.